we need to talk about WB games and DC video games in particular because, oh boy, what a mess. How the times have changed, man. 10 years ago, we were a year away from the release of the conclusion of the Arkham trilogy. We'd had Injustice Gods Among Us and a sea of great LEGO Batman games, including the third one that was just a celebration of DC on the whole. On the flip side, Marvel games were in absolute shambles. You'd get a Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, sure, but then you'd get an amazing Spider-Man 2 or a really crappy MCU tie-in game. Fast forward to now, and how the tables have turned. Marvel games as a brand are just thriving, and it's just hit after hit, pairing IP to studio that makes absolute sense and seeing the success of it. They've just got such a wide portfolio of games that are either in development or actually released, whether that's PvP, strategy, a third-person action-adventure, or the wildly successful Marvel Snap on mobile and PC. And then I look at DC and I'm just like, what are we doing, man? What are we doing? This comes alongside a report this week that WB is looking to sell a stake in its gaming division. So, not outright leaving the gaming business, but quote, offload smaller assets. This comes alongside gaming revenue being down 41% in the last quarter, and they're blaming Rocksteady's Suicide Squad for that. Well, you know, I kind of blame WB, because who would have thought that a team that's never made a live service game, with a studio that's severely understaffed to make and support a live service game, makes an unsuccessful live service game? But maybe there is actual signs of intelligent life somewhere at WB, since alongside that revenue news, they've also said that they're looking to license out franchises to other studios. And that's what I want to talk about today. WB are known for just bad decisions, but man, they still have the juice to be successful if they can follow Marvel Games' approach. So let's take a look at Marvel Games. They've now become an entire subsection of the Marvel brand, pairing IP to studios that make sense. It's not been hit after hit for sure. I really enjoyed both Guardians of the Galaxy and Marvel Midnight Suns, but they weren't successful in what these studios define success as: money. Since the release of Arkham Knight, let's take a look at every console, DC and Marvel game both announced or shipped. So DC in that time have released Gotham Knights, Arkham VR, Batman Telltale and Suicide Squad. On the way, we've got Batman Arkham Shadows and Monolith's Wonder Woman as the confirmed titles. Marvel games since then have released Spider-Man 2018, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Spider-Man 2, Marvel's Midnight Suns, Guardians of the Galaxy, Iron Man VR, Marvel's Avengers and the Guardians Telltale games. Announced is Marvel's 1943 Rise of Hydra, Iron Man, Black Panther, Marvel Rivals, Wolverine and Blade. I mean, what a stark contrast, right? But it's not just that, it's pairing the right IP to the right studio. Like, to me, EA Motive and Iron Man are a match made in heaven, in the same way that Arcane and Blade are just perfect together. They make complete sense. I think it's time for DC and WB to follow that model. And they've shown that they're willing to license these kind of games out, with Camouflage making an Arkham VR title. There's just such a vast amount of brilliant DC characters to license out if they're willing to do so. Maybe I'm a little biased, but it feels like before the MCU kicked in, DC was the bigger brand. Sure, you'd have your two juggernauts, you'd have Batman, and you'd have Spider-Man, but then after that, it felt like it was Superman and Wonder Woman, and the Marvel characters that are popular now, like Iron Man, like Black Panther, weren't as big and mainstream as they maybe are after the MCU. Maybe it's just the fact that I grew up on the Batman the Animated Series and the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited animated shows, which was fantastic, and they showcased the best parts of the DC universe. There's so many characters here that just lend themselves beautifully to video games. Sony make the best in class action-adventure games. Give them a Green Lantern. Crystal Dynamics and Tomb Raider would have been perfect idea for a Green Arrow. Look, a team should always want a project, but despite the shambles of the DCEU, DC is still a big brand, man. If James Gunn can steady the ship with the DCU, the potential of synergizing with games would be massive. James Gunn obviously spoke about creating video games for his DC universe. I think that would be a bad idea. Video games are taking longer than ever to make, and it's not quite on the same timeline of a movie production. Alongside that, you don't want that kind of creative restrictiveness. I get it, but I think having a Superman game alongside a Superman movie in two different universes is a better option than a Superman that is in that same DCU. That's just me though. I'm obviously just talking about DC mainly here, but WB said it themselves in that they've got 4 huge franchises in DC, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones and Mortal Kombat. Leverage that. It would be such a WB idea to give away both Mortal Kombat and NetherRealm, and even if they sold off NetherRealm, why would you sell off NetherRealm when you probably just license the IP back to them anyway? But expand on that universe too. Let someone else make a Mortal Kombat third-person action game whilst NetherRealm cook away on whatever the next project is. This is something that I've actually spoken about recently with Halo. Everything Halo related has been 343. And with that, they feel the pressure of the timeline and trying to get the next Halo thing out. But if somebody else created something in that universe to take that pressure away, it would immensely help 343 and the weight that fans have. And I feel this in DC. Other than Wonder Woman and Monolith, WB have solely relied on Rocksteady and WB Montreal to produce the DC games. So when Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad don't hit, the wait is then agonising for the next entry in the DC universe. But then, if you truly want an ongoing live service DC game, pair it with someone who has experience in the DC universe. Let Rocksteady do what they do best, make a single player action adventure game. When I was making my Suicide Squad 6 months later video the other day, I was sifting through all the footage, and I was looking at some of the encounters, and 2 stood out in particular. The 2 Batman encounters. Those encounters felt like something of a Rocksteady game, where the Batman is stalking you and hunting you, and then when he uses the fear gas to create multiple versions of himself. I genuinely believe that if Suicide Squad was developed as a single player game, we are talking 9 out of 10 reviews. The worst parts of the game are the bloated bullet muncher boss fights, the bare bones and lackluster endgame, and the structure of it being tailored for 4 people. In those Batman encounters, it feels authentic to Batman, in the way that the Green Lantern or the Flash or Superman really don't. Those boss fights had to be tailored for 4 people, so you get big, open areas, generic mechanics, and then just shoot them till they die. The core of the game in the traversal, or the stunning metropolis, and the character designs, the presentation, the actual feel of the game is all fantastic. But the live service co-op elements are the worst part. Like, don't get me wrong, my dream game still is an ongoing Justice League live service game, where you start off and maybe year 1 is Vandal Savage, and then the next year is the Legion of Doom, and it all just builds and builds and builds until you fight Darkseid on Apocalypse. But how cool does that sound? But that's not a Rocksteady Studios game. That's for someone else to take on. Like, there's so many DC projects I would love to see. Have our own kind of DC Ultimate Alliance game. Have some kind of Dishonored inspired Deathstroke game. Do what kind of Marvel did with like Midnight Suns, but it's Justice League Dark and you're kind of controlling them members in a strategy game. All of that sounds great, but when you're relying on 3 studios to just churn out IP, that's not enough for the breadth of the DC and just WB franchises across the board. And I'd love to see somebody pull off the impossible in making a well-designed and incredible Superman game. Go watch my Adventures with Superman, by the way. I watched that last week and I was blown away. Really incredible stuff. But all of this requires structure. A division at WB looking at pairing the right product to the right team. And WB in this current state, I have zero confidence in them being able to achieve that. Thing is, even if this changed, we're not going to see the effects of that for years. So let's say that Rocksteady's pitch of a new single player game is accepted. We're talking 4 years minimum, most likely 5, before we see that game. I think at the end of the day, it's like most things in video games. It all comes down to inept leadership at WB. I mean, it also feels like the entire future of the DCU and its movies all hinges on one film in James Gunn's Superman. I think we're in the safest hands possible for that though. Look, DC is the comic book franchise that I personally grew up on most. I enjoyed Marvel, but DC was where I was kind of raised on. And seeing this franchise just so horribly mismanaged, whether it's games, whether it's movies, animation, whatever it might be, it sucks. And then I'm seeing the whole thing of maybe PlayStation should buy them, maybe Xbox should buy them. And I'm like, have you seen what's happened in the gaming industry in the last 2 years? 20,000 jobs have been lost. So consolidation is clearly not the answer to the problem here. Most of that is down to the rich just wanting to see that number constantly go up. So they just chase whatever the latest hotness is. There's also another interesting conversation, is that do people really want another Arkham game? I don't think the issue is whether people want an Arkham Beyond or another Arkham game. It's more, is that the only project in development? Like, if we're only getting Wonder Woman, and then WB Montreal's game is like, let's just say random thing, Teen Titans for example, and then it's an Arkham game, it feels like it's just Batman, Batman, Batman. But if they went down the Marvel Games approach where it's like, okay, between Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, you got Guardians, Avengers, and Midnight Suns. And between Spider-Man 2 and the most likely Spider-Man 3, you'll have Iron Man, Wolverine, 1943 Rise of Hydra, and maybe Black Panther. So it feels like there's options there rather than it just being Spider-Man, Spider-Man, Spider-Man. In the same way that if DC branches out, it's not just Batman, Arkham, Batman, Arkham, Batman, Arkham. And I say that as someone who loves the Arkham franchise, that Batman Arkham City is my favourite ever video game. Video on that soon too. Maybe it's optimism, maybe it's coping. I don't know, but I think WB can turn this around. I'm just not sure they have what it takes. Hogwarts Legacy feels more of a fluke of a success because of the desperation for a game to just exist in that world and franchise rather than a strategy. Look, they're saying the right things in wanting to expand these IPs, but then they're also saying all the wrong things in the counter argument in that they want to maximise free-to-play games. So, who knows man, I don't trust these people with this franchise. This kind of thing requires a whole subsection of people, and Marvel Games has that. DC and WB doesn't seem like they do. A team to say, hold up, Rocksteady on a live service game? That's a bad idea. There's such a plethora of IP within DC alone. To build on these characters and to create these worlds, DC isn't just Gotham and Metropolis, it's Star City, it's Central City, it's Themyscira, it's Battleworld, it's Apocalypse. But as of right now, it feels like WB Games and DC are just in absolute shambles. I don't know man, we'll just have to wait and see. But now I want to know, what do you think about all this? Would you like to see WB take a Marvel Games approach and license its IP out? If so, what is your dream studio and dream IP matched together? And what's the one DC game that you would love to see get made that hasn't been already? It's Superman, isn't it? I'm Sidekick, I know. But let's just have a chat in the comments. All I ask as always is just please be civil. As always, leaving a like on the video is always appreciated. And if you're after more comic book games coverage, just know that I've got you covered. Marvel Rivals, Suicide Squad, and anything else that's upcoming. So consider subscribing. And maybe check out some of the other comic book content that we've got on the channel. We just went back and revisited Gotham Knights. Suicide Squad Season 3 coverage is done. And I've got a nice Arkham video in the works that I'm quite excited about. As always, all my socials are linked in the description down below. So if you want me for anything else, you can get at me down there. Other than that, I hope you have a terrific day, look after yourself, and I'll catch you next one.